Welcome to Uncontested Sports' preview of the Toronto Maple Leafs. What John and I are going to be doing every day of September, carrying into October, is previewing a different NHL team each day. And today, we are joined by a very, very special guest. He has a podcast, the Steve Dangle Podcast Network. You can catch him on Sportsnet. He has his own YouTube channel, Steve Dangle. And he also has this book, This Team is Ruining My Life. We are super honored to be joined by Steve Dangle.
Yeah, big applause. Let's go. Thanks, guys. Good to be on.
No, thank you so much. He's getting his car fixed right now. We really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I got nothing else to do.
Crazy for me because I'm a big Steve Dangle fan. I've been watching him for years, even though I'm a Habs fan. So I apologize, Steve. But I like the Leafs. Honestly, they're a very good team, and I have no hard feelings towards any Leafs fans or anything like that. So,
Shut up.
happy to get into it.
What we'll start by doing is John's going to read through the lineup. Steve will give his thoughts. We'll move on to some of the stats from last year, some of the ins and outs, and then we'll get into predictions. So, John, start with the lineup.
So, per daily faceoff, you got Nick Ritchie, Austin Matthews, and Mitch Marner on that first line. Then you got Kerfoot, Tavares, and Nylander. Third line, Bunting, Kampf, and Mikheyev. And the fourth line, Simmons, Spezza, and Kashe.
Yeah, it's very interesting given what we've seen in the preseason so far, and we all know what you can do with the preseason and the results and the lineups. I mean, nothing's set in stone, but unless I'm mistaken, I think Kerfoot's been a center for each game. And, considering their issues on the wing, I'm kind of wondering how the Leafs view it internally. Like, by adding Kampf, did they feel like, oh, we're adding to our wing because now that frees Kerfoot up to be a winger full time? Is it a versatile decision? I'm really not sure. I don't know where he fits into the lineup. I really liked that line last year, but do they really want to be using Bunting in a defensive role, and Ilya Mikheyev wants a more offensive role, and is Nick Ritchie really a first line forward? We're going to learn a lot over the next few weeks.
Yeah, no, this Leafs teams, when I look at their forward group, it's the same kind of core pieces. Well, the same core pieces in their top six that you're going to be relying on. That's going to get you into the playoffs. And then the bottom six, I think that it's definitely an interesting look in the bottom six. A little bit different than last season. Steve, what do you think of the scoring depth on this team, or is that not too big of a concern when you got those big four?
Well, we learned last year. Well, I was going to say it is a concern, but it's not really true. I mean, you look at some of the performances you got in the playoffs. 37-year-old Jason Spezza had 3 goals in 7 games. That's really good. Nylander had 5. Not that he's exactly depth, but you get 8 goals out of those 2 guys. You should win that series every time. If Campbell has comparable numbers to Carey Price, you should win every time. If Kerfoot had 6 points, he had 6 points in 7 games, you should win every time. The big guns got to get it done when it matters. And I think there's a lot of overthinking going on right now with the Leafs, and probably within their own dressing room. How do we fix it? How do we fix that? Literally all they had to do was play like they did in the regular season and not lose 3 consecutive playoff games. And we're looking at a completely different season. Do they probably get past the Jets? I think they do. Does actually winning a playoff series go to their legs? I think it does. And by then you're in the Final Four, and then who knows where the season could go. So the depth to me isn't an issue. Like, this is yet another season where I think you could argue they're like 5 lines deep at least of NHL forwards. To me, what's really interesting is their bottom pairing, because I think it's jump ball. I don't think it's a given Travis Dermott is in the opening night lineup. Liljegren could get in there, but at the same time, I don't know if there was a Leaf player who was worse in the first preseason game than Rasmus Sandin. So he's got to be better the rest of the way.
I think their biggest problem in terms of the forwards is just it's all mental. They need to get some like team psychologists or something like that, because this talent, they're not chokers. I don't think in terms of like the way they play. I think it's just all a mental thing, and when it happens every year, and they know the fans are gonna get on them, it doesn't help.
Hey, I want to add though, if you want to see the mental, you want to see that side of the game, Steve's podcast network has like special access to the Amazon All or Nothing documentary, so go check that out. But John, read the defense, and I want Steve's thoughts on the
defense. Morgan Riley, TJ Brody, and then second pairing Muzzin and Hall, and the third pairing, as we said, Sandin and Dermott.
Yeah, this is the first time in many years where you look at the Leafs top four from the season before, and you're like, that's great, keep it. So like that's a pretty marked improvement on previous years. Oh boy, Dermott on the right side though. Like what drove me nuts is the Leafs' last moment in Montreal last season was them out-shooting Montreal 13-1 in overtime. Travis Dermott does his best Booker T impression and does the spinaroonie in his own end. And then the second shot, the Habs get that entire overtime, deflects off Zach Bogosian, and it goes in the net. And then one of the first things I see Dermott do in his first game back in Montreal, the second preseason game, I think his first, was he does a friggin' spinaroonie in his own end again. and I wanted to jump through the screen at him. So I think given what the Leafs are trying to accomplish this year mentally, in terms of Stanley Cup winning habits, what about that as a Stanley Cup winning habit? I think, Sandin showed some bad tendencies too. When is Timothy Liljegren's time come? And part of me, after watching the early bits of this preseason, I kind of wonder if it's now.
Wow.
For me on defense, their top four is not bad at all. Definitely a playoff top four. It's just their depth, as we said.
Well, yeah, we'll see how that bottom pair with Sandin, Dermott, whether it's Liljegren that comes in, highly touted defenseman there, how they can actually defend. But I think we're good for goalies if you are.
Yeah, and Jack Campbell and Peter Mrazek are your goalies. Some big switches there that we've seen this summer.
Yeah. Why'd they stop with Freddie? Why is Freddie gone to Carolina?
Well, I mean, that guy, I don't think he's played a healthy game for 2 years. So that's a concern. And then you're going to ask him to take a discount, which I think is a tough thing for players mentally. I'll wait for that truck to pass by. I think it's a tough thing mentally. So, like, for example, he can go to Carolina for less than $5 million, but he can't sign with the Leafs for the same thing, right? I've been your starter for the last half decade. I was your MVP in at least a couple of those seasons. And I got to take a discount? I don't think so. So, like I'm looking at that from Freddie's standpoint. But I think Campbell and Mrazek, I think that's a great tandem. And that's sort of the way you got to get through the regular season for a lot of teams. Like, not very few teams have Andrei Vasilevsky. Like, even the Montreal Canadiens, who have Carey Price, now have Jake Allen, and they have a few other guys in the system as well. The issue is once the playoffs start, if you get there, you got to pick one. And I don't know how you make that decision. Do you go with the guy who was your starter in last year's playoffs, or the guy who you're paying twice as much as that guy?
Yeah.
More than twice.
That's fair. We're going to get into the stats from last season here. First in the North with a record of 35, 14, and 7. I saw your shirt in that prospects video. Looked like you were very happy wearing that first in the North shirt there. The 16th best power play in the league and the 24th best penalty kill in the league. That power play to me is a little bit lower than it should be.
For sure.
It should be top 5 every season with the money they have on it. Like, it's amazing. The Leafs had 2 of the top 5 scorers in the entire NHL, plus John Tavares, plus William Nylander kicking around, plus Morgan Riley, who's put up 72 points on the heels of a hot power play. And all those things worked for them. And none of those guys I mentioned had a bad season offensively, and they just couldn't get it done on the power play. That's another – I mean, maybe we should have seen it coming with the playoffs and maybe some of those between-the-ear struggles, because as Sheldon Keefe pointed out last season, the power play struggles he thought was between the ears as well. I feel bad for a guy like Manny Malhotra. He comes in, and I think part of the reason everyone thought he did such a bad job is he got early results and he was highly touted, and then it all went to hell. But it's not like the power play has been a juggernaut for the past couple of years. To me, the consistent thing is the guys playing on. They got to get it done when they have the opportunity. You have 2 minutes to score. Can you do it? You have 1 game to close out this series. Can you do it? That seems to be the theme.
Yeah, always comes back to the playoffs. Points leaders from last season: Marner with 67 and 55, Matthews with 66 and 52, and Tavares with 50 and 56. And the offseason, they had some ins and outs here. Ins: Peter Mrazek, Nick Ritchie, David Kampf, and Andre Cachet. And the outs: Anderson, Hyman, Jumbo Joe, and Zach Bogosian. What do you think about their offseason, Steve?
I mean, for what they were trying to accomplish, I suppose it was fine. But you're never going to get the gold seal of approval from me when you lose Zach Hyman for nothing. And the Leafs have been doing so much of that. And from a value standpoint, they're getting killed. Like, they win the cup or make the Final Four. I don't think any of us are really complaining about the Nick Foligno trade, but he got hurt. They lost. You screwed up. You lose JVR for nothing because you were going for it. You win a couple rounds. No one really blinks. You lost. You screwed up. And now it's Zach Hyman. You kept him. And is the exact same thing going to happen with Morgan Riley? God, I hope not. But in terms of their offseason, they have needed a defensive center for a while. It was concerning to me that they signed a guy I had actually never heard of in David Kampf. But it sounds like they've wanted him for a while. But I do remember seeing that tweet come across the timeline and going, who the hell is that? Nick Ritchie. Yeah, that could work. Zach Hyman light. Who Zach Hyman is? Zach Hyman. I understand the reason why they had to move on from him, but that doesn't prevent me from being a little bit bitter about it.
Yeah, Hyman's a tough loss. He's been a staple in the top 6 for the past couple years. He's a workhorse. Really just one of the, I know not maybe vital in all the scoring plays, but just one of the heartbeats of this team for sure.
He wanted to stay too, which is tough.
Yeah, and then Foligno, it's another loss, right? After giving up what they gave for him at the trade deadline. But John, you also mentioned the point leaders. Leafs fans expect those point leaders to stay the same when you have that core 4 at the top, like we've been referencing all episode. But Steve, before we wrap up with what we always do for these is that we all go around, we all say one player to watch, and then we all go around again and we make our prediction for where they finish in the season and how far you think they can go in the playoffs. That's the golden question with the Leafs. So, John, start with your player to watch.
Yeah, I'm going to say Jack Campbell. He was a perennial backup, and you want to see if he can do it again. Had a good season last year. I thought for the eye test, he didn't pass my eye test for a lot of the time, but his stats were awesome. So he could, if he does the same thing this year, he's definitely a starting caliber goaltender. But you want to see if he can do it again.
Steve?
Oh, is it my turn?
Yeah.
I'm going to say one of the things you're going to see in this documentary is they talked about the lack of playoff style goals, and right away the first thing he does basically in a Leaf uniform, Michael Bunting scores one of them. So to me, just from an attitude standpoint, from a style, mixing it up after the whistles, and he scored one of those playoff goals. They can score the fancy ones. They can score from far out. They need a little bit more bang and crash, and he's a guy who's going to have to fill that Zach Hyman void.
Yeah.
It's a good pick.
Me, my one to watch, it's not really one. I'm actually going to pick the power play as a whole. I'm a Canucks fan. Manny Malhotra, we were so sad losing him. Then he goes to Toronto and he's getting shredded on my Twitter feed. So I want to see how they do this season. I think that it should definitely be a lot better. We talked about that with the personnel that they have there for that unit. If that unit is not top 10 in the league, it's Like, it's unacceptable, and they should be top 5. So that's who I would be watching. And then I guess I'll just continue with prediction.
Yeah, start with yours.
My prediction, I think the Maple Leafs finish 4th in the Atlantic. It's a tough prediction, but I got to stick. Earlier when we did our Boston preview, I had Boston in top 3, so I have to stick with that. Even if they don't have Rask, might have me rethinking it, but with Rask, assuming he plays, Boston looks solid, Florida and Tampa. I just think that Toronto doesn't have the same depth that they have. I find in terms of their defensemen and their actual ability to defend, some of them are questionable. And then in that, I don't mind their tandem at all. But when you compare it to Vasilevsky, and if Tuukka Rask is there, Tuukka Rask, I think they kind of end up on that 4th spot. But playoffs, I think this might actually be a blessing in disguise if they do finish 4th, because they will get into the playoffs. And I think in a wild card matchup against the Carolina Hurricanes, I can see them winning that. So Leafs fans, I think this is the year you come out around 1. Maybe not the same regular season dominance you're used to, but that's my kind of, I don't know if that's bold. I don't think it's bold, but Steve, what do you think?
I think we see a trade before American Thanksgiving, and I think it's going to be rather significant.
You heard it here first.
A roster player, maybe 2. Yeah, wouldn't be shocked.
Really? So how do you think they do in the regular season?
You know what? Sometimes there's overcorrection, and I think maybe we were a little too excited for them last year. This year, I mean, no one's high on the Leafs right now. No one, which means, who knows? Maybe we're underestimating. It might be a little too low. Like when are they going to overachieve? They haven't overachieved since 2013. So it's been 8 years now. Just let me check my non-existent Apple Watch. They're due. So, it'd be amazing if they overachieved and finished a little higher than that 4 slot.
Yeah.
For me, I have them at 3rd behind Florida and Tampa. Tampa, to them, they lost a lot of depth, but I still think it's Tampa, and they have Vasilevsky. And then Florida is also a very good team, so I'm going to put them above Toronto. But unfortunately for me, I think this year when they go into the playoffs, it's going to be against very tough competition just because of the division. And I think they're probably going to lose, but it's not going to be a choke because the other team's going to be a very good team. So,
I got news for you. You lose for a 6th straight year, no matter what the circumstances are. It's a joke. I don't care if they're playing the President's Trophy winner. It's a joke.
And Steve, I've heard you say that this season you're not gonna put much of a stake in the regular season. You're really waiting for the playoffs, right?
It's 82 meaningless games. Like they what you're gonna see in the documentary is they were winning. They were winning the whole time, and Dubas and I think Keefe especially, they had their finger on the pulse. They knew there were problems. They had an inkling that this team might struggle in the playoffs, and they were right.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Damn.
That should be fun to watch.
That should be very fun to watch. But I want to give a shout out to a couple things here. So, one, Steve's book. We have it here on the set. This Team is Ruining My Life. Check that out. Steve's podcast. They also just added a new show with Chris Johnson. Check that out. John, anything?
LFRs. I don't think people have me to tell them to watch Steve's.
Yeah,
LFRs.
no, honestly.
Too much stuff. Yeah.
No, it's crazy. We love the content you push out. It's all great stuff. And also, Steve, on the show, we have this buzzer here. I don't know if you can see it from our interview. I think it's hidden by the computer. But
yeah, I see it.
We basically ring that for cold takes. And so if John says something that I think is cold, ring the buzzer. I say it, vice versa. Every time we ring that buzzer, the other person who said the bad take has to donate. Right now it's at $15 to a charity. And in honor of having you on, we're going to give it to the Sick Kids Foundation. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, yeah, boys. Appreciate that. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So, John,
problem.
you want to wrap things up here?
Yeah. If you like this video, like, comment, share the video, hit the sub button. Thanks again, Steve, for coming on. Check out our other team previews. If you like any sport, this is the channel for you. And that's a wrap.